Welcome, everyone. My name is Charlene Margot. I am co-founder of nonprofit The Parent Venture. And again, we are delighted to have with us tonight Dr. Belle Liang, who's going to be talking to you about how to navigate life. Take it away, Dr. Liang.
Thank you so much for the invitation to join you all. It's just a real privilege to be with you tonight. And I'm looking forward to sharing some of the research that comes out of our lab that we've been doing this work for the last couple of decades, and we're looking forward to just being able to have a conversation about that. When it comes down to it, I want to say that I'm a faculty person and a researcher in the field of purpose and belonging, specifically as it focuses on young people, adolescents, emerging adults. But at the bottom line is I'm also a parent. So I also have skin in the game, just like you all. I have got kids figuring out their journeys too. One of them is beginning his journey in college. He's a sophomore, and the other graduated not too long ago. So I just want to thank you all at Parent Venture. I'm really thankful for the chance to share with you some of the concerns and wisdom that we all have, been thinking about over the last several years. And I want to say that when I speak to parents in and out of the country, I can see a real similarity in the sense that we are all looking for ways to help our children grow into their best selves without piling on unnecessary and extra pressure. So today I'm hoping we can just share a bit about how we do that, how we can support our kids to grow up in environments at home and at school that really encourage them to grow and to thrive. I want to start with a story. A number of years ago, my family decided to, okay, I'm going to see if I can go to the next slide here. It's a little stuck here for some reason. The slide isn't going to the next one, which is okay. We can keep going even without the slide.
Do you want to reshare, Belle?
Okay, let's see here. Technology always keeps things so interesting. You know, you just never know. Okay, you all seeing that okay?
We see the first slide.
Okay,
there you go. There you go.
Okay. So a number of years ago, my family took a trek through the Italian Dolomites, and these are these majestic, beautiful mountains that straddle Italy and Austria. And honestly, my husband and I thought that this would be a great way to have our kids a captive audience, no cell phone towers, no friends around, no homework, no gaming, all while hiking against a backdrop that looks like this, The Sound of Music. So we left our car at the bottom of one trail, and all we needed to do was to find our way to the next trail, next refuge by nightfall. So we set off with our hiking boots, with our backpacks, with water bottles, and of course a map. And this was just one of those beautiful days. The sun was shining, there wasn't a cloud in sight, not even another hiker in sight, which was a little bit concerning. But we pressed on. It seemed like we were alone in just the gorgeous Dolomites. And we felt and looked amazing. Trust me. It was all going so well for a whole 20 minutes. And that's when we faced our first challenge, a decision point. The directions that came with our map said, go straight up the first mountain and follow the signs to the blue trail. The problem was that when we came to a fork in the path, there were no signs to be seen. So we had to literally make our best guess on which trail to take. And soon it became so steep that we were literally crawling up the rocks on our hands and knees. Now, it did occur to me that this seemed a little bit beyond the beginner intermediate level trek that we had signed up for. But by the time that we were all in agreement about this, we were hours behind schedule. We were at the base of a sheer rock face with no way to go but straight up. Our problem was the map had point-by-point directions, but what we needed was a compass. Now, life is full of these moments where you come to a fork in the road and you have to choose. Our children face these inflection points all the time. These are the times when the decisions they make can seriously change the course of their lives. And we undergo these inflection points as well as parents. It's what our students are constantly up against when they're deciding to whether to go to college, where to go, deciding on a major, planning on a career, choosing a life partner, maybe. When these critical moments hit, we tend to look for signs to tell us which way to go. And often they seem missing or hidden. So what do? Our kids and many of us tend to ask everyone around us who has an opinion. Not surprisingly, often that advice doesn't seem to fit us too well. It's like using someone else's map to get to their homes, not ours. If only we had our own compass to navigate by. So far from having this clear compass, when we're navigating these defining moments, many of us and our students feel this deep, gnawing sense of disconnection. Disconnection from ourselves, from what we want, and where we're headed. And these feelings are pretty universal in the world around us right now. We are in the midst of what we call a disconnection crisis. We're smack in the middle of it. The World Economic Forum recently ranked disillusionment right up there with global threats like pandemics and natural disasters. So this isn't a fringe issue. It affects young and old everywhere, and it really hits a peak in late adolescence and early adulthood. Young people are feeling incredibly disconnected from themselves. 42% feel so depressed that it's hard to function. 63% report overwhelming anxiety. 22% feel that they don't matter to other people. And they feel disconnected at school and at work. 52% feel overwhelmed by the workload. 29% feel that college isn't worth the cost. 48% feel that college isn't preparing them for their futures. And so not surprisingly, they feel disconnected from their futures. Over half of graduates regret some major decision they made, either the college they went to, the major they chose, or the field they entered after college. 38% don't know what to do with their lives, and less than 50% find any real purpose in their work after graduation. So today we're going to just talk about some things that will help to guide us to this other side of the disconnection crisis. We'll start by explaining why it's so hard, why it's so common across generations, not just for young people, but empty nesters wondering what's next, retired professionals seeking new purpose. For across the board, we are experiencing this disconnection crisis, and I want to talk about root causes. I also want us to discover how a purpose mindset can help serve as our compass. And then I'm going to show you how to practice reflective intelligence, something that you need in order to adopt a purpose mindset. It's going to help you get connected to who you truly are and help your students to get connected to who they are and what they truly want. And finally, I'm going to talk about how belonging emerges from social reflection, from reflecting together. So let's start with the first point. Why is this happening? Well, to simplify this and really cut to the chase, it's because we don't teach people how to find their way. So instead of knowing who we truly are and what we truly want, most people, many of our students navigate by constantly asking themselves two questions. The first question is, how can I make sure that I'm successful? And we ask ourselves, and our students ask themselves this question whenever they're making a decision, so they can choose the direction that they think minimizes failure and maximizes success. And we call this singular pursuit of success the performance mindset. This is the belief that we live in a hyper-competitive zero-sum game with very few winners and a lot of losers. And in this world, the purpose of life is to win, we think. And we win by being better than the competition, whether they're your rivals or your best friends. This is a scarcity mindset that makes us afraid that if we don't perform better than everyone else, and our kids feel this, if they don't perform better than everyone else, they won't get what they want. They worry that if they don't get the best grades or join the right clubs or get in with the right people, or you serve as the captain or the leader of the most competitive teams, that they won't be successful and they won't be happy. Now, I want to admit that for much of my life, the performance mindset was my go-to. It's a little embarrassing to show you these pictures of me back in high school, but I want to just tell you a little bit about my story. My parents immigrated to the US to give my brothers and me a better education. And both of them made huge sacrifices for us. So I did everything in my power to try to make their sacrifices worth it. So, as a first generation American kid growing up in an Asian family, I knew that my parents' expectation was to do well in school. So, I worked hard to get straight A's. And I knew what my peers thought doing well in school meant as well. For a high school girl growing up in the suburbs of DC in the 1980s, it meant being popular and athletic, being a class officer, dating the right people, and having really big hair. So I did all of those things. When I went to college and I had to choose a major, I again looked at my compass, which was magnetized towards outward validation, as you can see. I knew what every Asian American kid in the 80s knew, that there were three acceptable careers: be a doctor, be an engineer, or be a doctor. So I chose chemistry pre-med. In fact, any time I faced a big decision about school or work, I would just ask myself, what should I do? The right answer was always whatever others expected me to do. Well, then came the day when I realized I needed to start listening to my own heart and not just the expectations of those around me. And that's exactly how I became a psychologist. I still remember sitting my parents down and telling them I was changing my major from pre-med to psychology. It didn't go well. It was as if I had just told them that I was dropping out of college to become an alien. Their reactions ranged from, "Can you get a job doing such a thing?" to, "How could you do this to us?" And I don't blame them, because these were the definitions of success that they knew, and they wanted what was best for me. I see now that this isn't just an immigrant story. In hundreds of our research interviews and surveys, students express this feeling of constantly living someone else's life. They say things like, "I don't know who I really am and what I'm really living for, apart from others' expectations for me." Yet they continue to be performance machines towards goals that they don't even know if they're their own. They're working harder than ever. And by some measures, they're more successful than in school than in any generation before them. The problem is that the performance mindset works until it doesn't. A number of years ago, the head of a high achieving private school came to me. Actually, it was Lisa Demora's school. I was doing research in her school. They came because they were desperate for help. Their students were excelling in every way. They were getting high test scores. They were winning selective scholarships. They were getting all sorts of leadership awards. They were getting admitted to the most highly rejective, highly selective universities. On paper, these students looked stunning, but the paper wasn't telling the whole story. Over and over again, the parents reported that their students were crying themselves to sleep at night, that their levels of depression and anxiety were through the roof. So the head of the school asked me and my research team to help them understand what was going on. So my research team conducted a 3-year longitudinal study where we surveyed several hundred students. We surveyed their parents as well as many of their teachers. And here's what we found. Many of the students expressed overwhelming anxiety. They said they went to school with knots in their stomachs, and they wondered whether their lives were even worth living. It turns out that having a performance mindset drilled into their heads did not help these students achieve a sense of achievement and meaning. These kids ended up viewing life as a never-ending sprint towards a finish line that keeps moving further and further away. When you view life as a performance mindset, it's not a question of if you will burn out, it's a matter of when. Now, in response to the burnout epidemic, more and more people have been rejecting the performance mindset. We've seen since the pandemic a wholesale trend of people quitting the rat race, selling off material possessions, embracing van life, becoming digital nomads, kind of YOLOing it. We've seen these trends in terms being called things like the Great Resignation or quiet quitting. And I just want to say something very interesting, which is that the call of the road isn't attracting just retirees. The hashtag van life has more than 6 million Instagram posts by millennials and Gen Zers because they're beginning to realize, what's the point of succeeding if it's only making me miserable? The problem is they're just trading one fear for another. While rejecting the performance mindset and the fear of failure, they're latching on to a second fear, the fear of struggle or suffering. People afraid of struggle or suffering are less concerned about success and more concerned about feeling good all the time. Their choices are guided by a second question: how can I make sure I'm happy? Now, when we're overly focused on feeling good, it causes us to adopt what we're calling a passion mindset. This is the belief that the goal of life is to be happy. When we adopt this passion mindset, we follow a different strategy than the success-oriented people. We try to maximize positive emotion and minimize negative emotions. And we think this is the key to happiness. The passion mindset inadvertently sends a very dangerous message about negative emotions that they should be avoided at all costs. Now, obviously, I'm not talking about people who have serious mental health concerns and difficulties. Those people absolutely need to be taking care of themselves and getting the help and the treatment that they need. What I'm talking about is an avoidance of the normal vicissitudes of the ups and downs in life that all of us face. And when we convey this to our children that negative emotions are to be avoided, it sends an unrealistic picture to our young people. So we might actually cause them to avoid meaningful pursuits if it makes them at all uncomfortable. And we know that many of the things in life that are worth pursuing can make us uncomfortable and can be really hard and very, very challenging. And the truth is that having all emotions, the good, bad, the ugly, are all part of the human condition and the human existence. So unfortunately, the more we obsess over happiness, the more unhappy we become. People with the passion mindset feel bad about feeling bad, which makes them feel worse. It's this sort of a vicious downward spiral. Thinking success or serving our every whim and following our bliss is going to gratify us is making us more disillusioned than ever. And more people are beginning to realize it. There's this quote by Jim Carrey where he famously said, "I think everybody should get rich and famous and do everything they've ever dreamed of so they can see that it's not the answer." So why doesn't this work? Why don't these mindsets work? It's because ultimately these mindsets are about comparing ourselves with others. We're constantly asking ourselves questions like, am I happy or successful enough? And because enough is hard to pinpoint, we ask, am I as successful or happy as my peers, as my neighbors, as the people around me? In both mindsets, we tend to base our self-worth and what we're supposed to do on how we measure up to others. We live in a comparison culture. 12% of our daily thoughts are spent comparing ourselves to others, and that figure is probably much higher for our young people who are on social media. Unfortunately, when they and we compare ourselves to others, we never feel enough. It's because there are always somebody who, at the swipe of a finger, appears more accomplished or happier than we are. And that's why we can look at Instagram and go from happy to unhappy in 10 seconds. Comparison truly is the thief of joy. It leads to higher rates of depression, higher rates of anxiety, burnout, and inability to perform. Ultimately, both mindsets are about trying to measure up to other people, and they lead to the same place of endlessly climbing expectation mountain. Okay, parents, so is there any good news here? If both the performance and the passion mindsets stink and they lead people to a dark place, is there an alternative? Well, in our research, every time we studied the relational and mental health of various groups of students across demographics in and out of the US, there was always a subset of students who seemed to be thriving. They were not suffering from the same debilitating anxiety and the same levels of stress that their peers were suffering from, even though they were under the same academic, physical, financial pressures as their peers. These students seemed to be more hopeful, more resilient. And when we looked at what the difference was between these thriving students and their peers, we found that they weren't actually doing anything all that differently. It was the reason or motivation behind what they were doing that made all the difference. These students weren't desperately chasing success driven by a fear of failure. And they weren't desperately chasing happiness out of a fear of suffering or struggle. They were driven by something bigger than themselves, a purpose mindset. Their self-worth did not hinge on the successes or failures in their lives. And you can just imagine what a relief it would be to our young people and how less stressful it would be when the stakes are not about proving themselves, if the stakes are not about measuring up. These young people in our studies who were driven by a purpose mindset were simply concerned with doing things that matter in the world in a way that mattered to them. Even if they didn't know exactly what their purpose was yet, but they had the intention to contribute to the lives of others in personally meaningful ways, they were experiencing all these positive outcomes, which I'll mention in a moment. Well, that's the research definition of purpose. It's the intention to contribute to the world in a personally meaningful way. The purpose mindset is sort of this perfect balance. It's a very good balance between the other two mindsets. It's concerned with making a difference in the world. So there's an external orientation, but it's also tuned into what's personally meaningful. And so there is an internal orientation as well. Research in and out of our labs shows that purpose has all sorts of positive outcomes. Mental health outcomes like increased resiliency and well-being, better physical health, even greater longevity, and much more academic and career success, including increased motivation, higher GPAs, higher graduation rates, and more fulfilling careers. Okay, so now you're probably, asking yourself, what can we do if we know that purpose is a good thing and we know that college graduates who view their life as and their work as purposeful were 10 times more likely to be thriving in their lives? What can we do to help ensure that our young people are experiencing purpose? Some of you are probably feeling pretty good because you're thinking, okay, this is fantastic. I have purpose in my life and my kids have purpose, or the people around me have purpose. And some of you are probably feeling worse right now because you're thinking, okay, I thought I had to worry about my kids' success and their happiness, and now I also have to worry about that they have purpose. But I want to tell you that that's not what this talk is about, is getting you even more anxious. It's to relieve you, to let you know that people have some big misconceptions about what purpose is. People oftentimes think that purpose is something external to us and to our kids. It's something out there in the world that you have to find, like finding your one true love. And if you don't find it, then you're going to be lost. And that's a lot of pressure. Purpose is actually something internal. It's the story that you and your students get to create. It's a story that you tell yourself about why you're doing the things that you're doing. Now, it's important for us to truly get this because oftentimes we hinge our hopes for our students on doing specific things in order to become successful. We think that if they choose the right college, or they get into the right college, or they choose the right major, or they get the right job, that they'll all be good, that their success and their happiness hinge on these external factors, many things that they cannot control. But what's more important, actually, is an internal factor. The story they and we tell ourselves about why we're doing those things. Now, it surprises a lot of people to hear that there are not actually fields or certain jobs that people are more purposeful in. Purpose is evenly distributed across fields and across majors. Anyone can have a purpose mindset. Now, when we started doing this research, we found that there wasn't much research on how to cultivate a purpose. And we saw an opportunity to meet a need. So we got to work, my co-author, Tim Klein, and I. And you're not meant to be able to see all this fine print. It's just some of the studies that we did where we designed a program for cultivating purpose. And we conducted a very rigorous study called a randomized controlled trial. And what we found is that those young people that we helped to create purpose practices, and we helped them to cultivate those practices, had much better outcomes in terms of even their GPAs and ultimately their well-being and their attitudes towards success. And so we wrote a book about that. We wrote a book about the practices of purpose. But I want to share with you some of the highlights from that book today. There are three major things that cultivate purpose, and they are meaningful relationships, formative experiences, and intentional reflection. Formative experiences is doing things with other people that make us feel connected to something bigger than ourselves. It's hands-on experiences. Meaningful relationships are having relationships where you connect with people that teach you something about yourself and teach you something about the world. And intentional reflection is reflecting on who we are, what we want, and what we want to do. I want to just kind of go into these a little bit, parents, because there are many studies, not just within our lab, that show that these three things are the three most important things that your kids can get out of college. If your kids decide to go to college, these are the three most important things that will get them the biggest bang for their buck and will ultimately lead to a purposeful life and a purposeful work. So the first one, I want to just dive into this one, is the power of relationships. The research shows that developing meaningful relationships is not just the wise thing to do, but it's the smart and practical thing to do. Alumni from college who have significant relationships with even one or two professors are twice as likely to find college very rewarding. So those mentoring relationships can be extremely powerful in terms of your students' sense of college being rewarding. Secondly, alumni with 7 to 10 strong friendships over the course of their college career, not, people that they have to find in their first year, but over the course of their college career, are 3 times as likely to have had an extremely rewarding college experience. And having supportive relationships during college doubles the odds of finding your future career meaningful. I want to also touch on the power of formative experiences. Parents, if you could take a look at these findings from a very large study by NACE, asking employers what they look for when hiring recent graduates, you will see at the top of the list formative experiences that are hands-on, internships, employment during college, volunteer experience, extracurricular activities. And what do you see at the bottom of that list? College reputation and college GPA. Now, this isn't to say that college GPA is not important for anyone. For those students who are going to be applying to competitive graduate programs like medical school or PhD programs or other kinds of competitive graduate programs, grades do matter, but they don't mean everything. They can help you get into the door, but they can't land you the job. So one of the most important things that students can be doing in college is to be meeting interesting people and doing interesting things. When researchers looked at what experiences are most tied to purpose, they found it was these 3 things: a mentor who encouraged them to pursue their dreams, that's meaningful relationship; a hands-on experience that allowed them to apply what they learned in the classroom to real life, and that's formative experience; and a class that helped them to find meaning in work. That's reflection. That's an opportunity for intentional reflection. Now, what happens when we put those three things together? Meaningful relationships plus formative experiences plus intentional reflection. Those three combined ingredients are the secret sauce for cultivating purpose. What is it about these relationships and experiences that cause purpose? Well, for one thing, they spark reflection. The research shows that the more you reflect on your relationships and experiences in intentional and purposeful ways, the more likely you are to connect to your purpose. And when we bring these three ingredients together, um, by creating space for people to share and craft their stories, we're giving people an opportunity to craft their purpose. We call this the practice of reflective intelligence. Reflective intelligence is the ability to articulate and understand who you want to be and what you want to have happen. I'm going to say that again. I'm going to put that definition up there. Reflective intelligence is the ability to understand and articulate who you want to be and what you want to happen. And here's the good news, folks. Our research shows that this is a skill that can be developed through deliberate practice. Reflective intelligence is developed by exploring life's questions, big and small. Big and small questions like, who do I want to be? What do I want? What will I do? And we're going to be sharing with you these slides, so no need to, write all these kinds of questions down. I just want to give you a sense of the kinds of questions that really, for many young people, cause them to think in meaningful ways that lead them to a purpose mindset. So the core practices of reflective intelligence are three things. They are envisioning the future. This is identifying and articulating who you are and who you want to be. Reflecting on the past, which is making sense of your past experiences that in some way inform and shape those future aspirations. And then acting in the present. Because if you know who you aspire to be, and you know your motivation for that, you know why that is from your past experience, how then shall you live? It gives you more clarity for what your goals are in the present moment and ways in which to take steps towards that future in the next hour, the next day, the next semester, the next year. Now, I want to just do something probably that maybe you don't do very often on a webinar, which is to make some reflective space for you all right here. I know that you all came to hear me talk, but one of the most powerful things that I can do for you right here is to show you a little bit about what the practice of reflective intelligence looks like. And so I'm going to ask you all if any of you have a writing utensil or a piece of paper to write on that you can pull out of your junk drawer or a desk somewhere. Go ahead and grab that in the next minute. And if you don't have something near you that you can write on, then feel free to go ahead and grab your phone. I usually say no phones in the classroom, but I'm going to say, you can use your notes function in your phone because I'm going to ask you to write for the next minute or two in answer to a question that I'm going to raise to you all. Because this is exactly what I'm going to show you what I would be doing with my students in the classroom by doing it on you and giving you a little taste of what reflective practice looks like. So I want you to start right now by envisioning the future. This is the first practice of reflective intelligence. It is about envisioning the future, thinking about the future. So I'm going to just ask you to quiet yourself for a moment. And this might seem a little hard at first. Some of you may be, just coming out of work or, had a busy day, and it will take a moment to get into a reflective space. But as soon as you start writing, I trust it's going to get easier and easier, and it's just going to start flowing like water. So trust me. So I'm going to give you the question in a moment, and I'm going to ask you to not lift your pencil or not stop typing in your phone to answer this question until I say stop. So I'll tell you when to start, and then I'll tell you when to stop. The question I want you to reflect on is, how do you want to be remembered? Ready, set, start. Okay, stop. Now, normally I would give students more time than that, 5 minutes to keep writing, and they can keep writing for even much longer on this question. But I want to just do a little bit of a demo for you tonight. Hopefully, you got a little taste of what came to mind when I asked you, how do you want to be remembered? I could have asked you, how do you want to be remembered by your children? Or how do you want to be remembered by your employers? Or how do you want to be remembered by your best friends? Um, and that probably would have evoked a question, an answer that that really stirred up for you questions about how the person you want to be. And oftentimes, when we do this, we ask people to think about the future. It's called prospection. What you just did was prospection. The research shows that this is what purposeful people do. When you do what you just did, it increases pro-social intentions, well-being, optimism, positive affect, and even performance. Because people don't tend to say things about how they want to be remembered that have to do with a performance mindset. They don't tend to say, I want to be remembered as the most successful artist or the best, the most lucrative company, or a person with this title, or a person who made this much money or had this salary. We don't tend to want to be remembered necessarily by our achievements. We tend to want to be remembered for the character strengths that make us our best self. When people are asked how do they want to be remembered, they say things like, and your students say things like, I want to be remembered as somebody who was generous spirited, or who was wise, or who was, a good person, or who was, who was spiritual, who was faith-filled. And they don't tend to say, I want to be remembered as a person who was accepted into this university, or, had this job title. They tend to want to be remembered by the strengths that make them their best self. So I want you to take a look at what you wrote and go ahead and circle some of the themes that emerged. And they're probably these character strengths that you want to be remembered for. If you were my students, what I would then do is say that, many of you put down these character strengths, and they're all positive strengths, but you'll notice that the strengths you put down that you want to be remembered for are maybe a little bit different than your neighbor's strengths around you. And so the next question is, why these themes? Why these strengths? We want to be remembered for the strengths that make us our best selves, but why these particular strengths? And in order to understand why you picked these particular strengths, the next question would involve thinking about the past. So we've thought about the future, and now we've got to reflect on the past. We've all had different life experiences that shape the strengths that we want to be remembered for. And to truly understand them, we have to understand the past. And so what I would ask your student is, why do you want to be a person who embodies those particular strengths that you identified? Is there a meaningful relationship or a formative experience that shaped how you want to be remembered as a person? And usually the student is able to come up with a story from their past that explains the strengths that they want to be remembered for. And if I were to give you some time, I imagine you would be able to think of important people in your life, significant people in your life who have had a positive or sometimes not a positive effect on your life that causes you to have the aspirations that you have and have the particular strengths that you delight in. Meaning in life is tied to these stories about our meaningful relationships and our formative experiences, the stories we tell ourselves. When we see our life in terms of these stories, and particularly in terms of what we call a hero's journey, it helps us to connect the dots. It helps us to understand why we aspire to what we aspire to, where it came from our past, and then how we can act in intentional ways in the present in order to be the person that we want to be. When individuals practice this reflective intelligence, which is thinking about the future, thinking about the past, and be acting intentionally in the present, it connects the dots. It helps them to develop their purpose stories. And when communities practice it together, it leads to purpose and belonging. This is hugely important for people to feel fully connected, for our students to feel fully connected to themselves. They have to feel connected to the world around them. They have to feel connected to you. They have to feel connected to the young people that they're going to be getting to know in college. And so we've designed a game called the Examine-On. I'm going to just go to that really quickly and show you a little bit about this game. This game involves social reflection. It offers a guided experience of meaningful and connective conversation. So it's these card decks that involve questions that fall into these 4 categories: thinking about the future, thinking about the past, and thinking about the present. Thinking about the future is values crafting. So the questions that we raise with students include things like, write a letter to your future self, reminding you of what you value the most or what you want to value the most. Story crafting is thinking about the past. It's asking students questions like, when you think of a time when a success you experienced felt hollow or surprisingly empty. Intention setting is thinking about the present. It's thinking about the near future. So if you know that these are your aspirations and you know why from your history, how then shall you live? What is an intention that you can set in the next week or the next month? You might want to set an intention to build more meaningful relationships or to develop healthier practices of exercise and other ways of staying healthy. And then insight gathering is looking back to the recent past to understand what insights you can glean from the experiences that you've had in the last week. So this is a game that involves reflecting on the future, reflecting on the past, and acting intentionally in the future, in the present. Now, I want to just touch base on a few takeaways that I want to leave you with today. Let go of the performance mindset and adopt a purpose mindset. And if you and your students don't know what your purpose is and you're struggling to envision a future that you want, practice purpose. The purpose mindset is a practice. It's something that you can deliberately practice in order to learn. It's dreaming big about what's important to you in the future and getting specific about that. It's looking back at the relationships and experiences that have informed the future that you're working towards. And then it's acting in the present. It's acting intentionally in ways that take you one step closer to that person you want to be remembered for. Okay, now some of you may be worrying about what happened to us up in the Dolomites. And so I want to just go back to that story. We did eventually find our way to the first refuge, and our hike had continued upward all day until we crossed the tree line and we could see this refuge in the distance. We knew that there would be a warm meal and bunks would await us. So we were excited as we saw that we were approaching that point. But by that time of the day, we had been all carrying our packs, heavy packs all day, and we were pretty spent. And my husband, David, who was carrying, let's just call it the dad bag, was especially having a difficult time keeping pace. So he set my daughter and I up the mountain to get to the refuge so that they would know that we were coming. My son and David stayed behind because our rule was always to hike with another partner. Now, what we didn't know after we left, Zoe and I left to head to the refuge, was that soon after we left, David became more lethargic and more short of breath, symptoms of altitude sickness. He found an old World War II emplacement cut into the side of a mountain. And in his delirium, he said to Toby, I'm going to just lie down in this cave and take a tiny little nap, and you go on without me. Now, Toby knew that his dad was in trouble to be suggesting something so absurd, breaking his own rule about never hiking alone. By now, Zoe and I were at the summit. We were looking down the mountain and straining to see them as the light started to fade into dusk. We knew that the temperatures would fall. We knew that the mountain would become dangerous to hike after dark. Now, moments later, even though we couldn't make out their faces, Zoe spotted two silhouettes coming up the mountain. And she said, isn't that Dad? And isn't that Toby? Squinting, looking at them down the side of the mountain. But what's Toby wearing on his front and his back? And then we realized he had hoisted his dad's pack onto his own shoulders and hung his own pack on his chest. And we could hear his voice in the distance, encouraging his dad to keep putting one foot in front of the other all the way up the peak. The moral of the story is that in life, you need a compass. You need a purpose to guide you and to set you in the right direction. But purpose alone can't always take you to the finish. You need the right people by your side, because there are moments in our journey and in our students' journeys where we're lost, where we're spent, where we need people to come alongside us and help carry our load. No one with an ambition ever achieved it without the support of a community. So one of the best pieces of advice that you can give your students is to tap into a community of people to help them discover their purpose. Now, in closing, let's just remember that it's perfectly normal for our kids and even for us to face moments of uncertainty, to question their direction, to reconsider what they once thought was their true north. That's part of growing, and it's part of the adventure of life. What matters most isn't the doubt itself, but it's the strength that they find in navigating through it. What's our role as parents? It's to be their steady support. It's to be their sounding board, not their helicopter parent, not their snowplow parent, more like a lighthouse parent, somebody that is there to remind them that every challenge is an opportunity to discover their strengths, discover their passions, and ultimately to discover their directions. Purpose is not about reaching a set destination. It's about embracing the whole adventure with all of its twists and turns. It's in how deeply we live. It's how bravely we show up for each day. And it's how much we care along the way. So as we move forward as parents, let's encourage our kids to embrace every stumble and every triumph as part of their unique journey. To all of you and to your incredible students stepping boldly into the future, here's to the adventures that await and the stories you will tell. Thanks, everyone. Look forward to hearing your questions, and we'll bring Charlene back in now to see if anybody has any questions for us.
Well, Professor Liang, that was really extraordinary. You know, we've been doing this for many years, but we don't often get the insights that you gave us tonight. So thank you. Thank you. Really extraordinary.
Thank you.
I'm a grown up with adult children, and you've given me so much to think about. Really appreciate that.
So grateful. Thank you, Charlene.
Wow. So, Belle, one of the core values of this organization is that we believe that parents matter. And in your book, you mentioned that parents can actually become the blueprint for their children to engage in the world. Can you just talk for a minute about what you mean by that?
Yeah, and one of the things I just really want to dig into, because the word purpose is so intimidating to people. And I think it's, as I said before, because we see it as something that you have to go and find. What if you don't find it? Like you're going to be lost. instead of seeing it as the story you tell yourself about why you're doing the things you're doing. And that's why purpose is for everyone. Sometimes people think, that purpose is at odds with what's practical. I often have parents say, like, well, if you don't come from privilege, then you don't have as many choices and you just
Yeah.
need to do the practical thing, right? And that is not what the research shows. The research shows that it's not just privileged people who have purpose and no one else can have purpose, that in fact, young people from all backgrounds across demographics, from the most impoverished communities, many of them have greater levels of purpose than kids who are privileged. I would say that sometimes privilege is a liability in purpose, because we are, when you come from backgrounds of purpose, sometimes you are trying to live up to the standards of the performance mindset, and you're not doing the reflective work about what's personally meaningful and what are the injustices in the world that you feel that you could be a part of healing. So it's something that is relevant to all, and it's not something to be intimidated about, but rather to, give yourself an opportunity for reflective space for discovering what your story is.
It's so interesting you say that. When I started this program close to 20 years ago now, we were very big on having kids find their passion. And it wasn't until I was at a conference that a teenage girl, we were walking to lunch, and she whispered to me, "What if you're too busy to find your passion?" And I realized that we had just added a burden to these already very overwhelmed kids. But what you're suggesting is something completely different, isn't it?
It really is. And there's a practice to discovering purpose, and it is really the intention to do meaningful things in a way that contributes to the world around yourself. It's not even that you need to know exactly what way you're going to do that. It's the intent. Purpose is the intention to contribute to the world around yourself in a way that's personally meaningful. How do you know what's personally meaningful? That's the question. And the practices that we talk about in the book are for how you begin to know what's personally meaningful. We have what we call elements of purpose. There are 4 elements of purpose that point in the direction of what's personally meaningful. They are learning about what strengths make you your best self, learning about what skills you're motivated to learn and you're motivated to keep using no matter what your job is. Most of us know, like, even now, if we haven't had a job, like, what are the things that we love to do and we hope to always be doing no matter what our job is, right? So
Yeah.
those are the skills. And then the third is, what are the values that you stand for, that you're willing to sacrifice for? And fourth is, what impact do you hope to be making? And there are ways to develop more and more self-knowledge about those 4 elements of purpose.
Wow. So we have some great questions from the audience. Let's see if we can do this in a couple minutes that we have left.
Speed.
All
Okay.
right. This is a good one. Aren't teens and people in their 20s unequipped to figure out their life purpose?
Well, I love that question, because I just think that it's something that all parents worry about. And here again, I want to say I appreciate the question so much, because I think that there are probably a lot of parents online wondering about this.
Mhm.
It's not something that purpose is not a destination. It's not a job. It's not a career, that we're talking about when we're talking about purpose. We're talking about a mindset. It's an orientation. It's a way of doing life. And so that's why everybody can have purpose at any age. It's waking up in the morning and deciding that, in what ways might I today contribute to the people around me in a way that's aligned with who I am as a person. So if I know already, like, these are the strengths that make me my best self, like, let's say for me, it's like, I want to be a person that's wise and generous spirited. Well, how can I use those strengths to contribute to my kids' day today,
Yeah.
to my husband's day, or to my friends? That's really what purpose is. It's not about just finding the destination, the end point of our lives.
That is really beautifully said, Belle.
Mm.
Beautifully said. So, okay, here's a good, very honest question. With reflective intelligence, how do you not beat yourself up for mistakes that have happened in your past? Sometimes shame gets in the way.
Absolutely. There are, again, I so appreciate these smart questions. So, when we talk about reflective intelligence, we're not talking about rumination over the past in ways that are destructive to us. We're like really trying to reflect on what are our future aspirations? What are the values that we hope to stand for? What are the skills that we're motivated to learn? What are the strengths that make us our best self? What's the impact we want to be making? And why are those the way that they are? What from our histories inform and shape those particular values, skills, strengths, contributions that we want to be making, needs in the world that we want to be meeting. And then ultimately setting an intention. Okay, if I know that that's my aspiration, those are the strengths I want to the strengths that I make me my best self, the needs that I want to meet, and I know why. What's one thing I can do to take a step closer to that person I want to be in the next hour, the next week, the next month? So that's very different than ruminating and bringing ourselves up for everything that we didn't do. Like today's a new day, like what's gone is gone. We have tomorrow. And that's the beauty of it is that, we all have our histories. Even as a researcher in this area, believe me, I'm no perfect parent who did it all right. I am, just like you, I'm on the journey. I'm, a parent of adulting kids for the first time. Every time, we parent one of our kids, it's like the first time. So, we're all in this together. And it's not about beating ourselves up for the past, but it's really to look forward to the potential that we have in the future.
Dr. Belle Liang, that is a beautiful thought to end on. And you've given us so much inspiration, so much to think about tonight. We are very, very grateful. Those of you who are on, thank you for being on this journey with us. And when I close the session, a Zoom survey is going to pop up. I hope you will give us your comments. Belle, I'm sorry, it means that our time together is over, but we are extraordinarily grateful to you and for your research. I hope this is not the last time we spend together because it was wonderful.
Thank you so much, parents. Thank you, Parent Venture. This was a lovely night. Appreciate you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Liang. Beautiful evening. Thank you, everybody, for being on with us and such great questions. Don't you love all those hearts? I do.
Love
Okay,
it.
take care, everybody. Hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.